The moving truck's engine coughed one last time before falling silent. I stood there, hands on my hips, staring at the quaint row of manicured houses along Maple Crest Drive. This was supposed to be a fresh start. My new home, my new office, and unbeknownst to them, my new territory. The first knock came before I even got the key in the front door. "Mr. Hayes," a crisp voice called out. Two people in neatly pressed polos stood on my porch, clipboards in hand, their smiles stretched tight. The man spoke first. "We're from the Maple Crest HOA. Before you settle in, there's a small matter we need to clear up. 3 years of unpaid community dues. Totaling $4,800. I raised an eyebrow. "Funny," I said. "Considering I've owned this property for less than 2 hours. The woman leaned in, lowering her voice. "If you pay today, we can waive late fees, but we'll need a check immediately before the board hears about this." A thin mist of unease hung in the air. My gut told me this wasn't about dues. This was about intimidation. I'd seen this routine before, strong-arming newcomers before they know the rules. What they didn't know was that I'd been brought here for a very different reason. I stepped inside, motioning them to follow. "You're right," I said, flipping open my briefcase. "We do have some business to discuss." The man smirked, thinking he'd already won. That smirk vanished when I slid a stack of files onto the counter, property ledgers, rental contracts, and a master lease agreement for the entire subdivision. My name was on every page. "You see," I continued, "I'm not just your new neighbor. I'm your landlord. And those dues you're so worried about? They're part of the rent you pay to me." Their faces drained of color. The woman stammered, "This must be some mistake." "No mistake," I said, my tone even. "Now, why don't you tell me why the HOA is knocking on my door for money they already owe me?" The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. The man shuffled his clipboard, his earlier confidence crumbling. This wasn't just about a shakedown. Something deeper was hiding under their polished exteriors, and I had every intention of finding out what. Outside, the setting sun painted long shadows across the street. Maple Crest looked picture-perfect from a distance. But I had just been handed the first thread of a knot I intended to untangle, and I had a feeling that when I pulled, the whole thing would unravel. By morning, Maple Crest looked like a postcard. The lawns shimmered with dew, hedges sculpted into perfect cubes, and the air carried the faint scent of fresh-cut grass. If you didn't know better, you'd think this was the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. But the pounding on my door at 7:05 a.m. told me otherwise. It was the same pair from last night, Paul and Denise, according to their badges. This time, they didn't bother smiling. "Mr. Hayes," Paul said, voice clipped. "We reviewed the documents you showed us. We believe they're forged." I leaned on the door frame, sipping my coffee. "You didn't even make it to breakfast before calling me a liar." "Impressive." Denise crossed her arms. "You might think you own this place, but the board will decide who's really in charge here." I almost laughed. "The board? The one whose rent checks are processed through my office?" Paul's jaw tightened. "You're new here. You don't know how things work." That was the first honest thing they'd said. I was new here, and I didn't know their system, but I knew power games, and this smelled like one. I let them stew a moment before answering. "Actually, I know exactly how things work. You've got a homeowners association that thinks it runs the show. Problem is, the land you're standing on belongs to me, which means," I held up my coffee like a toast, "you work for me." Paul's face darkened, but Denise's eyes flickered with something else. Fear. Not of me, but of something else entirely. I stepped closer. "Why are you really here?" Denise glanced at Paul, then away. We need to make sure you're going to play along. If you don't, there could be consequences." I didn't press yet. Instead, I said, tell your board I'll be attending their next meeting. I'd love to hear how they plan to run a community they rent from me." They left without another word. As they walked down the path, I caught something unusual across the street. Behind a curtain, someone was watching us. The curtain snapped shut when I looked. By noon, 3 anonymous letters had slid under my door. No return address, no names, just short, desperate notes, * don't trust them. They'll turn the whole place against you. They've done this before, * the perfect neighborhood was starting to crack, and I hadn't even unpacked a single box. The Maple Crest Community Center sat at the edge of the neighborhood, a pristine brick building with white columns and a polished oak sign. It looked welcoming, but the moment I stepped inside, the air shifted. 6 people sat around a glossy table, all wearing the same subtle expression, polite hostility. Paul and Denise flanked the chairperson, a tall man in a navy suit, who introduced himself as Victor Harland. "Mr. Hayes," Victor began, his voice smooth, "we understand you believe you have certain ownership rights here. Before we go further, we'd like to clarify the situation." He slid a folder toward me. Inside were photocopies of deeds and lease agreements identical to mine, except for one glaring difference: my name was nowhere. "These," Victor said, "are the official documents on file with the county. You'll see that you're not listed as the owner of this subdivision. Therefore, any claim you make about collecting rent is, frankly, unfounded." I kept my expression neutral. "Interesting. Because the originals are in my safe, and they've been verified by 2 different title agencies. So, either someone here is playing games with public records, or someone's running a con." A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Denise's hands tightened in her lap. Paul stared at me like I was a problem to be removed. Victor's smile didn't falter. "You're making serious accusations, Mr. Hayes. And you're making sloppy copies," I replied, sliding the folder back. For a moment, the air was thick with silent calculation. Then Victor leaned forward. "Let me give you some advice. It's easier to work with us than against us. Agree to let the HOA operate as it has, and we'll ensure you're compensated." I met his gaze. "And if I don't?" Paul's voice was low. "Then you'll find Maple Crest a very unfriendly place to live." That was my cue. I reached into my briefcase and laid down the master lease agreement in the middle of the table, complete with notarized stamps and signatures. The board members leaned in, scanning it. Denise paled. "This is your last warning," I said. "You can't bluff me. I've dealt with bigger sharks than this." Victor's jaw tightened for the first time. "We'll see about that." As I left, I caught sight of a man leaning against a lamppost outside, pretending to read a newspaper. He wasn't there when I'd arrived. And as I walked past, I heard him murmur into a small radio, "He's not backing down." The game had just escalated. That night, Maple Crest didn't feel quiet anymore. Even with my windows closed, I could hear the faint hum of footsteps on the sidewalk, the low murmur of voices that fell silent whenever I drew near. By 9 p.m., the first real strike came. The power flickered, then cut completely. My house went black. I stepped onto the porch, scanning the street. Most homes still glowed with warm, steady light, except mine. From the shadows near the hedges, I caught the glint of a flashlight beam, quick and deliberate. Someone was working on my breaker box. I moved silently across the lawn, my phone recording. The beam froze when I got close. "Evening," I said, voice calm. The man spun around, one of the board members I'd seen earlier, a short, stocky guy named Brent. He tried to cover the panel with his body. "Routine maintenance," he stammered. "On a single house, at night, without notifying the owner?" I tilted my head. "Sounds less like maintenance and more like sabotage." He muttered something about orders and bolted into the dark. When I turned the power back on, I found the lock on the breaker box had been clipped clean through. By morning, the second wave hit. My mailbox was stuffed, not with bills or ads, but with printed flyers. Each one had my face, taken from the HOA's welcome newsletter, with bold letters, * not the real owner. Beware, * neighbors who had smiled at me 2 days ago now looked away. Some even crossed the street to avoid me. But I wasn't playing defense. I spent the afternoon delivering copies of my verified ownership documents to every mailbox, along with a simple note, * the HOA pays rent to me. Ask them why they don't want you to know, *. By sunset, my phone started buzzing. 10 different residents called, all with similar stories: mysterious fees charged without receipts, threats of property liens, unexplained hikes in dues. It was bigger than me now. That night, as I sorted through the calls, a small envelope slid under my front door. No name. Inside was a single key and a handwritten note, * storage unit number 14. Before they find it, * no signature, no explanation. I stared at the key. If this was what I thought it was, the game was about to change, and the board wouldn't see it coming. The storage facility sat just outside the neighborhood, tucked behind a chain-link fence and a faded sign that read Maple Crest Community Property. The place was quiet, too quiet for a Saturday morning. Unit number 14 was at the far end, its metal door rusted around the edges. My pulse quickened as the key slid into the lock with a satisfying click. Inside, the air was stale, carrying the faint smell of paper and dust. Stacks of banker boxes lined the walls, each labeled in neat black marker, HOA Records, Confidential. I cracked the first box open. Inside were manila folders stuffed with receipts, contracts, and bank statements. At first glance, it looked like standard bookkeeping. But as I flipped through, the truth came into focus: phony repair invoices, inflated landscaping bills, and security fees paid to companies that didn't exist. This wasn't just bad accounting. It was embezzlement. One box had a separate envelope marked Board Use Only. Inside were photographs of residents, their homes, even private backyard gatherings. Notes were scrawled in the margins: * late payer, pressure. Keep him quiet. Foreclose if possible, * it hit me then, this HOA wasn't just corrupt. They were running a full-scale intimidation racket. I started photographing everything. Each shutter click felt like another nail in their coffin. Halfway through the pile, I found a binder thicker than the rest. The first page stopped me cold: Master Lease Agreement, Revised. My name had been replaced with Victor Harlan's, dated just 2 weeks earlier. The signatures were forged. This was their proof to discredit me. I didn't hear the footsteps until they were close. Mr. Hayes, Victor's voice echoed from the doorway, smooth but tight. Paul and Brent flanked him, blocking the light. You've stumbled into private property. That's a crime. I closed the binder, meeting his gaze. So is forgery. So is fraud. So is theft. I held up my phone, still recording. And I've got hours of evidence. For the first time, Victor's polished mask cracked. You think anyone will believe you? I don't need them to, I said, stepping past him. I just need the county auditor, too. By the end of the week, the board was suspended pending investigation. Residents began knocking on my door again, this time to say thank you. As for Victor, the last I heard, he was on vacation. Maple Crest looked the same from the outside: neatly trimmed lawns, cheerful mailboxes. But I knew the truth now, and so did they. In the end, I didn't just collect their rent. I collected their secrets. And those are worth a lot more. If you enjoyed watching this HOA battle unfold and seeing justice served, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next wild twist. Smash that like if you think Alex did the right thing, and drop a comment below telling me, have you ever had a run-in with an HOA like this?